All right, Deuteronomy 11. Let's call this one life and death because it may sum up in a simple question, which is understanding all the death that you've seen. Why not just choose the ways that lead to life? And that in many ways is how God starts out his counsel in chapter 11 when he tells the children of Israel to consider some of the things that they have seen, in particular, the discipline of the Lord, starting out with the discipline he used of Egypt and Pharaoh and of the Egyptian people to set Israel free, understanding the ways in which the Egyptians had treated the nation of Israel, holding them in slavery for roughly 400 years. He's going to say, once again, don't just remember what he did to Egypt. Remember what he did to your previous generation in the wilderness when he disciplined the sons of Korah. Understanding what he's done to both Egypt and your previous generation, what kind of choices are going to lead to life for you? Why? Because as we see, the way to life and the way to death can look really similar because the enemy is not interested in giving us easy choices. So what God is going to say is you need to once again understand the whole counsel of God and not ignore any parts of these rules as being insignificant. Likewise, he's going to say the counsel and the wisdom that comes from these rules is important enough that you need to study them to the point where they really become second nature. Understanding we've seen a progression. It's not just hearing that benefits you. It's hearing and doing. And it's not just the hearing and the doing, it's the sweat, the investment of time and the diligence that goes into learning. But it's not just a minimal level of diligence. Why? Because in chapter 6, he said you need to be able to be competent enough with these principles to teach them effectively to your children. And he's going to repeat that again. One of the things we didn't emphasize from chapter 6 is where these concepts were supposed to be. They were not only supposed to be in the heads and the hearts of the people, they were supposed to be attached to their bodies. They had these things called phylacteries that they used to try to live up to the standard that he was setting here in Deuteronomy 6 and 11. They were also to be on the doorposts of their homes and also written on the gates so that they were constantly reminded of the ways that lead to life. I've heard it stated this way by an elder a few years back. I'm not sure if it's more of an anecdote or the way that they actually train agents to spot counterfeits. But in training a person to spot a counterfeit bill, currency, they don't so much spend time teaching them all the different ways people can twist the genuine article. They train them to be so familiar with the authentic currency that any alterations begin to set off alarm bells with them. And so likewise, that is similar to what God is saying here. Not only do you need to understand the whole counsel of God, like an agent would need to know every corner of that bill of currency, you need to have it so second nature that you understand any attempts to fraud, because the enemy is, like we said, delivering frauds or a way to death that looks a lot like the way to life. I also heard a social media influencer say it this way. In going to spend time with some of the gangs out in LA, it was a gang culture he wasn't familiar with. But what he got to quickly see was the other side of that culture when he saw 50 and 60-year-old men who wanted out, but were still locked in many ways, enslaved to the lifestyle they led in their 20s and 30s, hoping that they could get out at an age where it just was not possible, or it was possible at a cost they just weren't willing to pay. And so this influencer was encouraging us to look deeper beyond the surface of what is sold to us as gang culture to get the whole picture. And in many ways, that's what God is saying here. He's like, you don't just need a partial picture of the wisdom that God is giving you. You need to know the full wisdom that God is offering you with such proficiency that you're not just able to teach it, but it's second nature to you to spot a fraudulent way back to Egypt or back to Korah, which is why we often say, in trying to understand these principles, we're wishing you God's best as you go forward in him. Not just diligently, but diligently enough to spot the frauds that the enemy is offering us.